Why is Legacy so diminished in 2024? Even though we have seen an uptick in Legacy ventures for Marvel, it just seems like no one really cares for the tradition of passing along mantles and ideals like they used to. Legacy characters used to carry the same flame their predecessor did, and they got to tell a new story their way. Whether that followed a person that came from a different racial background, or financial background, or gender background, it gave readers and writers the chance to explore different aspects of the world in their own way while keeping something familiar to both of them. And in our current world, Marvel has faltered in introducing their new Legacy heroes, and on the other side of the street, DC is going toward a full-scale reboot. And all this just makes you wonder, whatever happened to the Legacy superhero? In my last video, I talked about what people deem to be the first Legacy hero, Barry Allen. If you haven't seen that video, it is right there in the corner, but if you want to stay on this video, I'll give you a quick breakdown. Barry was introduced at a time when comics were at their lowest point in society. His introduction sparked a new era in comics for both Marvel and DC. They followed more scientific themes and introduced comic tropes and superhero media that is still used to this day. The reason I bring up Barry Allen is to say that Legacy characters can be an easy way to revitalize a mantle, or in this case, a whole industry. Barry Allen carried the torch for the Silver Age, there is no doubt about it. But even he had to take off the cowl at some point, or be disintegrated in the biggest comic crossover ever. Either way, this was the end of Barry Allen and the start of Wally West, the new and hip Flash. You can only go so long with the character before they start to feel outdated and from a whole different era. So it was the perfect time in 1986 to tell a new story with a younger person that more readers can relate to. Most, if not all, of your favorite heroes have had a time where they have to hang up the cape and their protege or inspired individual puts it on. From Batman to Captain America to Miss Marvel to Green Lantern, everyone gets a legacy of some kind. So this brings us back to the question of what happened to the Legacy superhero? What went wrong? Why does DC and Marvel hang on to their trophy heroes to the point of forcing resurrections and desecrating on their legacy? Why do they refuse to let things change and break free from the status quo? Well, I think I figured out the problem. The problem is you. And not you specifically, of course, but maybe our generation as a whole. We were brought up with the internet where anything and everything is a Google search away. We never have to wonder or ponder on anything as long as you have that device that you are watching me on right now. This factor aids my thesis by providing a platform for consumers to fact check their product. And the amount of praise I gave these Silver Age characters in this video might have been a little overblown because they weren't perfect. They have their dark moments and things that don't really age well in today's climate. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about if you've ever been on comic book Twitter. They'll never let you forget that Hal Jordan was attracted to a child, or Hank Pym struck his wife, or Wonder Woman used to lose her powers when bound by a man. And like I said in my last video, the creator of Wonder Woman was a very freaky man. But with that all being said, today's average consumer likes to have a Carfax on things that they read, so knowing something like this could, would, and probably should push away the once potential reader. So I think to combat and simultaneously try to fix ancient wrongdoings, these companies try to reboot the products in a brand new shiny continuity, free of all the baggage, and let people know this is not the same Hal Jordan, Barry Allen, or whatnot. But by doing this, you cut off an important lifeline to your company. You rely on these older characters in the hope to revamp them to a new audience because you can't catch a new reader with a new character that often. And even back in the Silver and Bronze Age, it was hard to catch a reader's attention with a new character. It took time. But the lifeline was your Legacy characters. They were the middle ground between new and familiar. I honestly think for DC, the New 52 did a lot of damage to the way people perceive a lot of characters. This era saw a lot of backtracking or retreading of old stories to tell origins or early years of our beloved trophy heroes. It's trying the line of circular storytelling, quite frankly, and we can elaborate on that in a little bit, but characters like Batman, Robin, Flash, Green Lantern were doing great right before this reboot. Dick Grayson was doing awesome as a new Batman and was mentoring Damian like a brother. He was the one who was smiling and caring, and Damian was the brooding narcissist. It was something we had never seen from the dynamic duo and never could have seen if Bruce still had the cowl. It was new and fresh, and even when Bruce was brought back to life because DC couldn't breathe more than a couple months without the brooding prince, Dick still kept the mantle of Batman and operated in Gotham with Damian along for the ride. Bruce would still go on to be Batman, but operate Batman Inc., an organization where he can recruit crime fighters and pay them to spread the Batman propaganda. But when the New 52 came around, it rewrote all of DC's history and put Bruce back as the one and only Batman, but with his son Damian as Robin. To me, this saw the growth of Damian. Not only does it take away the cool dynamic that Damian and Grayson had and replace it with two people people who think and act pretty similarly. They also forced him on a new Teen Titans team that was all about him instead of having him grow into his own person who would eventually make friends that could form their own team, just like his older brothers. Dick led and founded the Teen Titans. Jason eventually led the Outlaws. Tim led and founded Young Justice, and eventually, after tragedy, joined the Titans with some other Young Justice members to make a combination of the two teams, which he eventually led as well. Also with the New 52, we saw Barry Allen's official reintroduction as the one and only Flash. You see, he had to come back to life around 3 years before the New 52. He went through a lot of hardship like outrunning death, finding out his origin was retconned to where an arch enemy killed his mother, because all superheroes seem to have a dead mom or dad or uncle in their past. It's literally on the superhero origin checklist right next to the corny training montage after they get their powers. Barry, after struggling with his newfound life after constant thoughts of death around him, whether it be his past death, his mom's new death, or his friend's death, he decides to accidentally go back in time and save his mom. And I'm sure you know this story. Alternate timeline where Aquaman is fighting Wonder Woman, Superman is a skinny fraud, Batman is old and uses guns, and Cyborg actually was improved in this timeline, I can't lie. But anyway, after Barry Allen cleaned up his mess, he created a new timeline that erased all his trauma. History. No more Wally West, Bart Allen, Jay Garrick, Max Mercury, just him as the one and only Flash. They would introduce new characters that were supposed to be quote-unquote new iterations of Wally and Bart, but they were not the same characters from before. It's like they just bulldozed a legacy they built for decades just to start a new one on the rubble of it. New readers came to view Barry as the only Flash. There was no real legacy here in the New 52 if we're being honest. This was an initiative to put their patriarchs back in their prime for new stories. And whether it worked out good or bad, that is just not how you should carry your connected universe. In my opinion, you should rarely reboot. They have these legacies for a reason. Wally was supposed to pass the Flash mantle to Bart, and he would be the generation's Flash, and after that, maybe it would be one of Wally's kids. Legacy is a beautiful thing if done right and consistently. With all this being said, I should talk about how this could be considered a negative point for circular storytelling. Circular storytelling is basically a technique or structure of storytelling where a character's story ends in the same place it started. You're probably familiar with Rick and Morty or Community. The creator of these shows, Dan Harmon, is famous for his story circle that follows the principles of circular storytelling to a T. And this form of writing can make great episodes of television and maybe even movies in the right circumstances. But in comics, it doesn't seem to work that well. Well, at least not well multiple times over and over. Constantly rebooting and erasing history from these universes gives future stories no substance. It stagnates the growth of some characters and lessens the impact of any death or mantle given. Things like Jean Grey's sacrifice after turning into the Phoenix can never really be digested as such, seeing she just was brought back within a few issues and had major storylines to boot right after that event. The X-Men themselves are no strangers to this as well. Over the decades, they have gone through numerous times where mutants face extinction, persecution, and then a temporary reprieve, only for the cycle to begin again. While these themes are central to the X-Men's identity, the repetition can lead to a sense of narrative stagnation. Some of the worst Spider-Man stories stemmed from this trope. One More Day, the story where they were so afraid to let Peter grow from being a broke single post-grad guy who relies on his dear great Aunt May from time to time, to where he made a deal with the literal devil to erase his marriage to the love of his life so his 90-year-old great aunt could live again. And also, he received his secret identity back after it was revealed to the world, which some would call a good thing, but for the longest time, people have always said he keeps the secret identity because he doesn't want the people close to him getting hurt. But with Aunt May dead, his only real close allies were going to be heroes or villains, and of course his wife Mary Jane. And I think at his grown age and with his big brain, he's smart enough to figure out something to keep MJ safe, if not just her herself being self-efficient to keep herself safe. Also, every other major superhero in Marvel has a public identity, so the only thing really stopping Spider-Man at that point was the fact he had a secret identity for so long at that point. But don't get me wrong, there are still stories that use these tropes to their benefits, like the death of Superman. He could stay dead for a little while longer, but the story itself had a huge impact on the comic world. Under the Red Hood rewrote the death of Jason Todd. Bringing back Batman's greatest failure at first seems like a mistake, but in the story, they treat every character with the utmost respect, and especially Bruce and Jason themselves. They're not playing on any nostalgia because no one really liked Jason as Robin, but now he's back as an anti-Batman of sorts. It gives his character a lot more worth. And even when they brought back the original Brave and the Bold duo, Hal and Barry, I thought it was done in a great, faithful way. Barry and Hal were brought back to explore themes of death, expansion of an ever-growing universe, and redemption. The only problem with their resurrections was that they pushed away their legacy characters and eventually made it all about themselves. But DC did have the greatest run at legacies for decades with these characters, whereas Marvel could care less about them. Stan Lee was never the biggest fan of teen sidekicks. He chose a more realistic approach to his stories. His heroes didn't run around with a young ward attached to the hip. If anything, they associated with partners their same age or mentored a younger hero at points. But they didn't start gaining legacy heroes till recently. People like Sam Wilson, who became the new Cap in 2015. Jane Foster became the new Thor in 2014. Kamala Khan as Ms. Marvel in 2013. Riri Williams in 2016. And of course, their crown jewel, as of now, Miles Morales in 2011. So as you can see, most of their legacy characters are pretty new to the cultural zeitgeist. So it's only natural for them to struggle a little bit when introducing them to mainstream audiences so fast. Most of these characters didn't even have a decade to develop and grow their mythos. Throwing them into the mainstream can either go really great as they see someone who is new and fresh, or fall really flat as people just see them as a faulty copy of the original thing. Marvel to me should have kept building these characters naturally like DC did for decades through multiple comic runs, small appearances in TV shows, and maybe even an animated show or two. Make sure these characters are known before having them take over the mantle that people have loved a lot. Instead of spending time to build these characters properly, they have always tried to have all properties of their brand synergized. Whether that be the cancellation of Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes for a new Avengers show that resembles their new movie franchise, or the abandonment of creative shows like a Teen Iron Man, or standalone animated movies in their own separate universe. Everything they do is to streamline their brand, their characters, their whole universe. It needs to be moving beat for beat at the same pace so anyone can jump on and be familiar with everything, no matter if it's live action, animation, or comics. Another reason why the X-Men in the early 2000s were being ignored and played with was because Marvel didn't have the rights to them at the time and thought they could mess with Fox's box office by ignoring them in the source material. Legacy is important to me, not just for the fictional storytelling purposes, but from a personal standpoint. What I do in my life reflects on my parents, my grandparents, and anybody who had a hand in the person I become. We're not people that get reboots and new continuities. We try to better ourselves for the people who love us and want the best for us. And that is something that Legacy has always meant to me. It's the reason I love to read comic books. Who or what does this character want to live up to? Why do they do what they do? It usually comes down to the legacy of it all. Bruce and his parents, Clark and Krypton, Wonder Woman and the Amazons. They're all trying to live up to a legacy, and I think that is something we have lost in today's time. Thank you for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and I'll see you on the next one.